Okay, so tell me a little bit about yourself and how you got involved in the disability community.
Yeah, so my mom is actually an occupational therapist. So ever since I went to work with her and saw that being able to support people and play and do really cool and meaningful things with people was a job, I said that's for me. So I knew I wanted to be an OT ever since I was pretty young, like 4 or 5, when people started asking me. Um, and so I've been an OT now about 12 years, and my journey of how I am showing up and practicing has evolved as I have my own children were diagnosed as autistic. And when they were diagnosed, I had become more aware of the disability community advocacy and the neurodivergent movement. But at that time, very much really dove into listening and learning, and then discovered my own autistic identity. So, really starting my own practice, and in the past few years, really prioritizing um, community support and advocacy has been a very much strong part of my work and my practice.
Mm-hmm. Cool. So, like, what sorts of things do you do as an occupational therapist?
Yeah, so OT in general is a really just cool job. It means an occupational therapist works on occupations of, and what that means, it could be anything that is important for a person. So um for someone, it might be being able to go play basketball or go to school, or being in a relationship, or needing to sleep better, all the things that people do to be able to support themselves. So my work right now is mostly working with autistic and or multiply disabled people, and it can be a variety of things. I work with um, 2 year olds and I work with 80-year olds, and so it changes, and what someone wants and needs changes. So it's always exciting and can be different. Um, Primarily, when I work one on one with a client or with a family, it might be talking through accommodations or ways to support an environment better, or how to advocate for what things that that person might need in an environment that currently doesn't have that. And then that has really shaped how my work is to really try to myself think of how I can go in spaces and advocate. And um, I am also, besides my practice, Be Me Occupational Therapy, I also have a co-led organization called All Neurotypes, in which we do more community-based advocacy and neurodiversity affirming programs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's cool. So, like, how do you make sure that, children and adults with disabilities, have the tools that they need in order to, be independent? Like, what sorts of things do you do to make that happen?
Yeah, what I do is listen to what someone's experience is, and so it is so independent on all the parts of someone's identity, their culture identity, their racial identity, their language, everything that is their experience, and how what barriers they might have in different environments. So really thinking, observing, listening to what is that person's experience and how barriers are present, helps me figure out how I can best support them, either with going through and identifying what those barriers are, because it might be tricky of figuring out what is the thing that's making this kind of stuck or not work. It might be maybe a little bit more um, clear to understand. Like maybe there's executive functioning needs that kind of are tricky to, so having visuals that could be developed together to be able to bring into different environments. It could be um, talking through of figuring out what does the space need and is it not physically accessible, or can we ask for different accommodations within like a program or physical space. So I think how I work is really trying to understand what does it look like for that person, and it could be completely different for that person's experience and another person's experience in the same program, and helping to identify and um, either dismantle the barriers or help them support to figure out how they can participate or engage in a way that they want to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So like what kinds of stakeholders and organizations do you partner with regards to like occupational therapy? Any like nonprofits, organizations, things like that?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. So um, for Be Me, for my OT practice and how I work as an OT, there's kind of a space that's really interesting. I'm in Durham, North Carolina, so I work with our public school system, and we've been partnering with a nonprofit that supports our public school system. And the work that we're currently students work with us public school system and the equity and the ECE, exceptional children's, that's what North Carolina calls special education services, to really grow and connect equity and special education within the public school system. As we know, like they are very much segregated and separated. And so building and really centering a disability justice perspective to have disability within the centralized part of thinking about public school is something that I'm very interested and passionate in. So that is something I'm doing with a lot of our local community and people that are working within disability in Durham. And then for all neurotypes, we are actually connected with a nonprofit called Upstream. And since our organization is an LLC, we are actually supported by them for their nonprofit. So we can collaborate together to apply for grants with the support of their nonprofit status. So our organization is had a disability justice summer camp last year, and we're hoping to be able to do that again for 2 weeks and have it fully supported so that all campers would it would not be cost prohibitive and be able to come to camp for no cost. So we are partnered with them, and then we also are partnered with TheraFriends, which is a local nonprofit that was just started this year that is working to provide low to no cost therapy services and support to families in the local area.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's awesome. So, like, my last question here is, like, how do you go about addressing the stigma of disability? Because I know there's a lot in our society. So, from like an occupational therapy perspective, how do you go about like tackling that and making an inclusive environment for people with disabilities?
Yeah, that's a great question. And that's something that as I really kind of have gone through and still going through my own journey of learning and being in a more medical model and a more stigmatizing view of disability, and then kind of understanding my own internalized ableism, how I was showing up in as a therapist supporting people. I really present myself and my services to align with the social model of disability and helping people understand how maybe previous ways of either being explained that either your child is disabled and these are the things that like these how in medical model terms how that would be described, explaining the differences and explaining how people might grow in that shift of thinking, especially if that was a previous way that they have learned, or just knowing that a lot of society talks about disability in a stigmatizing way. So, continuing to offer that perspective and shift people's thoughts and paradigms of thinking of there is a right way to be and a wrong way to be, and how we know that that is not correct, that um, that there needs to be different ways that we're creating system, or we're changing how systems are being created to not um, oppress people who are not in certain bodies.
Yeah, I think that's pretty important.